just want to say before we even get into the Torah portion in our studies today, I want to just one line from the Baal HaTurim caught my eyes, and I can't even I just can't get over this. So this week's portion, which is Parashas Noach, says that God decides to destroy the world. In chapter 6, verse 11, God says, the world was destructive. The world became corrupt before God. And the world became filled with Hamas. So what is Hamas? So I'll read to you what Rashi says, but the thing that caught my eye, just like I can't even get over this, is what the Baal HaTurim says. God decides to destroy the world because the world became filled with Hamas. This is what the Baal HaTurim, well, let me say Rashi first, and then we'll get back to the Baal HaTurim. Rashi says that what is Hamas? Rashi to chapter 6, verse 4. Chapter 6, verse 11, tells us what is Hamas. She says Gazel, it's theft. As it states, Hamas asher b'kapehem. Oh, okay, so hold on 1 second. Somebody else is trying to get in, and I really want to help everybody get in, so they're emailing me, so it's going to take a minute. Let me just, hold on. Let me just do this. Hold on, let me just tell them.
You might send a bulk email to everyone.
Okay, fine. That's what I'll do. Okay. So you copy and paste the number just before the link. I'll just tell people to do that.
Right. Tell them to go into Zoom directly and then copy and paste the meeting number, and then that'll get you in.
Okay, I'm going to just tell people to do that. Hold on. So, sorry for those technical difficulties, but we're discussing the word Hamas, and Rashi says that Hamas means violence. That's what Rashi says it means. But not everybody agrees with that. But let me just share with you the Rashi. Rashi says, it refers to Gezel. It says, Hamas asher b'kapehem, from the theft that was in their hands, meaning they stole things. But the Baal HaTurim tells us something else. And I for some reason, I had missed this Baal HaTurim. The Baal HaTurim says that the word Hamas, the gematria of this word, is equal to, Baal HaTurim writes, Hamas begematria Gehenom, means hell. Sometimes you read something in the commentary on the portion and you just get goosebumps, that the gematria of Hamas is hell. So this teaches us, the Baal HaTurim gives us the punishment, that the way that people of the generation of the flood were punished. But we're seeing from here that there is this concept that Hamas represents the worst thing in the world possible. And that's what we hear, like coming out of Israel. I have a friend who's, I was speaking to him today. He's meeting me at the airport when I'm coming in because we're bringing some things for him and to give out. He's going to help me. And he said that his son-in-law was drafted in to help them identify the bodies that were massacred and tortured in Israel. And they said that the biggest problem they're having is with the babies, because the babies don't have any official records yet, so they don't have their fingerprints, and it was very, very difficult to try to identify the babies. That was the biggest problem. And so who would ever do such a thing to intentionally hurt a baby? That is the definition of Gehenom. It's a definition of hell. And so that relates to our parsha. So if anybody ever asks you, what's the message from our parsha, you could tell them this Balaturim, that the numerical value of Hamas is Gehenom. The numerical value of Hamas is hell. The Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud tells us that Hashem boiled each and every drop of the flood's waters in the fires of Gehenom. So first the water was boiled in the fires of Gehenom, and then it was used to inflict the destruction on the world. So therefore, Hamas, we could just do the calculation if it really works. Sometimes the gematries don't work. So Samach is 60, Mem is 40, that's 100, so it becomes 108. And Gehenom, let's say the Mem is 40, the Nun is 50, that's 90. And then there's the 10 of the Yud and the 5 and 3, so they do actually equal the same amount. You don't even have to do funny business. They both equal 108. 108. Okay, so now let's start at the beginning of the portion. And let's start with the Rashi, and then after the Rashi, I would like to look at the Baal HaTurim, and then Rav Moshe Feinstein. And of course, if you have questions along the way, we will stop and address those questions. So the first Rashi on the Torah first Rashi on the Parasha is one of the most classically quoted Rashis. One of the most classically quoted Rashis in the entire canon of Rashi. Rashi tells us, the verse tells us, Ewa told us, Noach, this is the lineage of Noach. Noach ish tzaddik. Noach was a righteous man. Tamim haya b'dorosav. He was pure in his generation. Esa Elokim esalach Noach. Noach walked with God. So that's the first Rashi. And I'll just review these Rashis because we have to review the Rashis every year, even though they might seem to us as so obvious and we remember them from previous years. Let's remind ourselves of what the Rashi says. This is the lineage of Noach. Noach was a righteous man. Rashi says, since it mentions him, whole the Hiskiro, Siper B'Shivcho, it tells us of his praise, as it says, Zecher Tzadik Uvracha. The tzaddik, the righteous person, whenever we mention him, we have to tell us of his praise. So you mention a tzaddik, you're supposed to mention the good things that they do. And then there's a second commentary. What is the second commentary of Rashi? To teach you, She'ikar toldosem shel tzaddikim ma'asim tovim. What is the lineage of the righteous? The lineage of the righteous are their good deeds. The lineage of the righteous are their good deeds. So it says this is the lineage of Noach. We would be expecting at that point for them to tell us, excuse me, at that point we'd be expecting them to tell us who Noach gave birth to, who his offspring were, but instead it tells us that he was righteous. So why does it go straight to telling us that he's righteous? To teach us this idea that our main lineage is not our children, but our good deeds. Our good deeds. That's our main lineage. In this context, I know I said I wanted to read all Rashi first and then read the Baal HaTurim and then read Rav Moshe Feinstein. But I want to just stop here for a moment and read what Rav Moshe Feinstein says. Rav Moshe Feinstein, the great 20th century posek, is less known for his commentary on the Torah, but his commentary on the Torah I've always found to be really moving and powerful. And we see what Rashi said, what Rav Moshe Feinstein says, quoting this Rashi. It says, Rashi comments, from this verse we learn that the main offspring of the righteous are their good deeds. Talmud tells us that the verse from Jeremiah, chapter 22, verse 10, which states, "Weep rather for the one who went away," is a reference to one who passed on without leaving any children. So the Talmud, the prophet Jeremiah says to cry for somebody who died without children. But Talmud says, but we learn from Rashi that this is not a reference to somebody who died without any biological children, because that if people have good deeds, that's what it means when you say weep for somebody who died without any offspring. It means weep for somebody who died and left the world without leaving behind any good deeds. That is the child that the prophets tell us to weep for. We're weeping for people who live a life and don't leave behind any righteousness behind them. And in light of this, we understand the verses in Yeshaya where Hashem says, Rani Akara, come rejoice, O one who is barren, by saying that if they keep the commandment not to violate the Shabbos and they follow the will of Hashem, they'll have something better than children. And so this is what Rashi is saying, that the good deeds amassed by keeping the commandments are themselves the equivalent of having children. And Hashem is saying that it's better than children. It's better to have good deeds without children, according to the rabbinic tradition, than to have children without good deeds. Now, what is a good deed? What's the definition of a good deed? I want to pause from Rav Moshe Feinstein and tell everybody what's the definition of a good deed. So yesterday's Daf Yomi gave us insight into that. And Daf Yomi has an expression yesterday said in the context of a man who betrothed a woman and he wasn't sure which one he betrothed to. That if he said that the Talmud says the idea in law is ein adam chotev v'lo lo. A person will not commit a sin unless he has a personal benefit to it. A person won't commit a sin just though somebody else will benefit from it. The basic idea is, let me read the Gemara so that you understand the context in which it's being said. I'll open up the Talmud to 63 from the Talmud. The Talmud tells us the following case, that let's say a person says, I betrothed my daughter. I arranged my daughter to be married to a man, but I don't remember to which man I married her. So he said, basically, I know it sounds insane, but you have to imagine that a person was, he betrothed his daughter. She was a young girl, and now it's years later. He comes back to the town and says, I betrothed her to somebody here. I just don't remember who. Okay, the law works in strange scenarios. So in that context, the Talmud says, we believe the man, but only to a limited degree. Then another person comes forward and says, I'm the one who betrothed her. The guy steps forward from the town and says, yeah, you married her to me. So the Talmud says, according to Rav, we believe him to give her a divorce, but we don't believe this man who stepped forward to say that he can live with her as his wife. Why did we believe him that he could give her a divorce? So now he gives her a divorce, so now she could marry anybody from that she wants. But if he wouldn't give her a divorce, she would be perhaps married to somebody, we don't know who, and she'd be stuck, unable to remarry. So we believe him when he says that she was married to him, so that she can remarry to whoever she wants. So why do we believe him? And the Talmud says the reason why we believe him is we say he's not going to sin unless he's going to benefit from it. Ein adam chotev v'lo lo. He's not going to get up there and lie and says, I was the one who was betrothed, which is a lie, unless he gets some benefit from it. So it's clearly the case that he was the one who betrothed her. But I was thinking like this: what does this concept mean? A person doesn't sin unless he gets some benefits. It means that sin is what is the definition of sin? Sin equals selfishness. And a person sins because they're acting in a selfish manner. They are not thinking about others. They're not thinking about the ultimate other, which is God. They're thinking that it's all about them. So that's this concept. This is relevant, obviously, to the parasha of Noach, or what caused the destruction of the world. That people were only thinking about themselves. They weren't thinking about others. They weren't thinking about the consequences of their actions. And in that context, what's the definition of righteousness? What's the definition of a mitzvah? A mitzvah is where we do an action that's for the benefit of something other than ourselves. The Talmud even says that mitzvos are not going to be considered to give us any personal benefit. Mitzvos lav lahenos nitnu. Mitzvos don't give us any personal benefit. So the definition of a mitzvah is doing something on behalf of others. That's called generous. So a sin equals selfishness, and a mitzvah equals generosity. That's, to my mind, the core of our faith. That you say, why do you have to do a mitzvah? If you talk to me about any mitzvah in the world, it's on some level generous. And any sin in the world is on some level selfishness. Now, it's so obvious when you think about it as it relates to like killing is the definition of selfishness, but even on any other sin, you're not thinking about a greater cause. And so that's the basic idea behind what's a mitzvah and what's a sin. And so therefore, what Moshe Feinstein is saying is that a person who doesn't leave behind good deeds that's really what it means when it says in the prophets, cry for the person who doesn't have any children, cry for a person who lives a life of selfishness, doesn't understand that the life is about so much more than just ourselves. I hear about stories about Israel. Now, right now, more than any other time in my lifetime, we've seen, obviously, as it relates to the Jewish people, more than any time in my lifetime, unprecedented destruction and devastation and tragedy. But what we've just also seen is unprecedented generosity, the way the Jewish people are responding, and everybody who's given, like to the cause that I'm raising for, every single person has also given much, much more to other causes. People are just giving, and then giving some more. And everybody's giving in their own way. I see that the Israeli army has a response rate of 150%, meaning to say that for the 100% that they call back, double that or 50% more than that have responded to want to serve. 165,000 Israelis have run back to the country during this war to try and chip in and help and fight for the state of Israel. That's called the generosity of the people involved. That's what we're seeing now. So when we're seeing an unprecedented generosity, which is the antidote, which is the opposite of what the word Hamas means in the Torah. So I just want to complete I was reading Rav Moshe Feinstein. So let me read Rav Moshe Feinstein, and we'll go back to the Rashis, and we'll go back to the Baal Turim. We have the time. So Rav Moshe Feinstein says, he comments on this a little bit more. He says, well, it's true that the main offspring of their righteousness are their good deeds. I was expecting Bruce to jump up and shout this out. This would seem to hardly apply to Noach, because in Noach, it seems that the main offspring were his actual children, because after all, Noach's children were the key to beginning the new world. That's why he had to save them. And so how is it possible to say that Noach's deeds were more beloved than his children? All the children are what made the future of the world possible, Noach's 3 children. So if you really want to, says Rav Moshe Feinstein, if you really want to teach the lesson, and welcome, Aya, we're really happy you joined us. And we're happy you went the extra effort to join us. We really, really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It says that the ID doesn't work anymore.
I don't know what to tell you. I need to figure this out. I mean, I don't know. I'm going to work on it. I need to figure it out. So if he really wanted to teach us this lesson, says Rav Moshe Feinstein, that the good deeds were more important than children, it should have taught us this message not when the children were the essential ones for the existence of the world. It should taught us about somebody else. But with Noach, it seems like his children weren't really essential for the continuation of the world. If Noach's children were lost, we're done. So that's the question that he asks. So he says it must be that the pasuk is coming to teach us that while sustaining life in the world is something so important. While it's important to sustain life, that's not the most important thing. It's important to sustain life as a means to an end of doing good things in the world. But just to be alive without that purpose, without having as our goal the actions of righteousness, that would not be worthwhile. It would not be worthwhile. And that's why that's why the Torah is making this point, that it only makes sense to have life if it's going to be associated with righteousness. This makes sense. This is the pshat, the literal interpretation of the verse. That's why God destroyed the world, because what's the point of a world where people are committing violence? And that's the reason why this verse is taught here. Okay, hold on. Let me just pause. I know that either Bruce or April have a question. So hold on. What is the say? This is the classic Rashi. Rashi says that Noach was a righteous man in his generation. Bidorosav Yeshmi Rabosenu. There are some of her rabbis, Dorshim Oto Shevach, who expound this word as praise, that they're praising Noach. They are saying, Kol Shekain, for sure, Ilu Hayu Bidor Tzadikim. If he had been in the generation of the righteous people, Hayat Tzadik Yoter, he would have been even more righteous. V'yesh Dorshim Oto Lignai, and there are those who say that this was a insult of Noach. It says he was righteous in his generation, meaning to say with Fidoro, according to the curve, he was graded on a curve. According to the people around him, he was righteous, because everybody else was Hamas, literally violence or Gehenom or hell. But if he was in the generation of Abraham, he would be considered nothing. It seems to me also very harsh. He would be considered nothing at all. How could you say he'd be nothing? I could say, okay, he wouldn't have been the number one guy, but to say he'd be considered nothing in that generation, that to me strikes me as a little harsh. But that's what the Rashi says. Rashi says that powerful concept. This is what the Lubavitcher Rebbe says about that. Excuse me. This is what the Rebbe says, and I always like to refer to the Rebbe when the Rashi is tricky for me to understand. He says there are two ways of reading the verse. These two different ways, the Chabad translation, the Chabad Chumash, as it as Noach was tzaddik, they translate that as faultless. Instead of saying righteous, they say faultless despite or relative to his generation. They spend a lot of time on that translation. And they say that these two different ways of reading the verse encourage us to emulate Noach's attitude towards his milieu, even when we might be inclined to do otherwise. What does that mean? When feeling spiritually robust, we might argue we don't need the protection of entering the ark, immersing ourselves in words of prayer and Torah study, for we do not feel threatened by any raging floodwater. So the first way of reading this negates this notion. Even the righteous Noach, he was so righteous despite his generation, but nevertheless, he needed to enter the ark. Even though he said, listen, I'm better than even though he was better than everybody else, he also needed to enter an ark. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe's approach to the ark is not that it's a physical ark, but it's not just a physical ark, it's a spiritual ark, meaning to say immersing ourselves in prayer and Torah study. Then there are other times, says the Rebbe, that Noach is like Noach in the second understanding of the verse, we are righteous only in comparison to those around us. What does that mean? That Noach, despite the raging waters threatening us, we nevertheless all have the capacity to save the entire world and ourselves. Our one good deed can tip the scale. One good deed can tip the scales and cause the world's merits to outweigh its demerits. And that's a very, very powerful idea. I've always felt. And this is why in the Chabad, as you know, they do like Mitzvahim, that's why they go out in the streets and they try to get one Jew to do one mitzvah, to light Shabbos candles and put on tefillin, because even though we're not the most righteous person, if we do one act, or if we get one more act to be done, that can tip the whole basis of the whole world. And that's what he's saying. That's what the Rebbe is saying here about Noach, that he has this ability. Even though he was just not necessarily righteous, if he did one act of righteousness, he could have the ability to change the world. And that, just to my mind, is also making the omission of Noach to do his evangelism even more offensive, because he could have saved the world maybe, or he could have at least tried, but it's not brought up. And then the verse, just to finish that verse, and it says that Noach walked with God, whereas by Abraham, Rashi says, by Abraham it says, walk before me. Noach hayat tzarich sa'ad u'tomcho. Noach needed support to bear him up, but Abraham but Abraham would strengthen himself and he would walk on his own. So Noach needed the help of God, whereas Abraham was able to do it on his own. Well, I would say that if we're able to go into the level of Abraham and be able to walk with God, that for us, that we get the support of God, that would be very, very special. If each of us are able to reach the level, because nobody's able to reach the level of Abraham, nobody today, that we're able to do without the help of God. So at least we can reach this help of God. So I want to read the Baal HaTurim on this passage, because we've given Noach a little bit of a hard time. But here's what the Baal HaTurim says. It says, first of all, the Baal HaTurim says, Ewa told us Noach ish tzaddik tamayma yabedorav et elokim hitalech Noach. Noach's name is written in this verse. Noach's name is written in this verse 3 times. That's what the Baal HaTurim points out. It's unusual that we have his name to be written 3 times. So why was it written 3 times? So says the Baal HaTurim, Shera'a Shlosha Oamos, that because he saw 3 worlds. What does that mean, he saw 3 worlds? That Noach was one of 3 people who saw 3 worlds. Who are the other people who saw 3 worlds? Daniel and Job. So Noach is similar to Job, very much so, very much similar to Job, and also to Daniel. Noach saw the world in its settled state, like Job, in its destruction, and in its resettlement. Most people don't have that merit. So they saw the world in its settled state, in its destruction, and then in its resettlement. Most people don't get that. Actually, only 3 people in history saw that. Daniel saw, so that was what Noach saw. He saw the world before the flood, during the flood, and after the flood. Very powerful when you think about it. Most people are not able to imagine that. If you take it down to a personal level, you see the world before, when it's settled, and you see the world in a tragic state, and then you see the world after it was rebuilt from the tragedy. But Daniel also, he saw the first temple in its glory. Then he saw the destruction of the first temple, and then Daniel saw the rebuilding of the second temple. So Daniel also saw it in all three stages. And Job, he saw its home in its glory. And then he saw his family destroyed. And then the Midrash is that he saw everything rebuilt. So that's what Rashi says. And then Job saw everything rebuilt even better than, even stronger than it was before. They say this about the Klausenberger Rebbe, that he had a tremendous family before the Holocaust, which was completely destroyed, and then after the Holocaust, he rebuilt his family. So maybe that we could add the Klausenberger Rebbe to like one of those three people. This was written by Noach, and that was before the war, but then after the war. But almost so rare. Alternatively, and hold on. Alternatively, we could say that Noach was what says the Balaturim, Davar Acher, Shayam Hitzil Shlosha Bisluto. He was one of three people who saved three others in his merit. Who did Noach save in his merit? Noach Hitzil Shloshet Banav, Shehem Shem, Cham, and Yafet. Noach saved three of his children, who are Shem, Cham, and Yafet. And Daniel received, hold on. Daniel saved Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, Bechalom, and Daniel saved Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah when he interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And Job saved his three friends, Eliphaz, Temani, Bildad, Shuchi, Tzofar, Naamati. Now there's a lot to comment on all this, but that would would take us too much aside. And because I wanted to read the last statement about Noach in this Balaturim. Davar Acher, why is his name Noach? To tell us the following: Noach l'shamayim, he was content with heaven. Noach l'brios, he was content with humanity. That's one. Noach l'elyonim and Noach l'tachtonim, he was content with the upper worlds and content to those of the lower realms, meaning he got along with God and man. And Noach b'olam hazeh and Noach b'olam haba, he's content in this world and in the world to come. So that, to my mind, is a reclamation of Noach. You might have thought that Noach is, he's not so good, but because we said, he's given a hard time. What did he do? He didn't do any actions. This goes back to what Bruce was saying. We were saying, no, from here we're saying he was at one with people and at one with heaven. His name Noach indicates that he was good. Sometimes we could that's where we learn it from here. So okay, so now I just want to do one more Rashi on this. It says, one more Balaturim. It says Tamim Haya, that he was perfect. What does the Balaturim say? Also reclaiming Noach. So reclaiming Noach, it says he was perfect. What does it mean? He was perfect. The gematria Tamim Haya, Balaturim says, the gematria is 20. Oel Minyan Esrim tells us 20. To tell us Shaya Tamim Bekol Esrim Doros Shemei Adam Ad Avram. To tell us that he was perfect for all the generations from Adam to Abraham, meaning to say that he was excellent for all 20 generations, meaning to say, but once Abraham came along, he was not considered to be the most perfect. So again, the Balaturim is saying that Noach was amazing. He wasn't as amazing as Abraham, but he was incredible. He was Noach. He was at one with all of the creatures of the world and the heavenly world and the below world. And he was the greatest person that came along until Abraham. That's what the Balaturim is saying. And so that seems to me a nice conclusion to our discussion. Was he great or was he not great? He was great. He wasn't as great as Abraham, but he was great. He saved people. He he saved the world. He saved, and he was Tamim. He was Tamim up until Abraham came along. I want to, Bruce and April have a question, and then I want to just repeat a few things.